Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. As promised, today I have another Christmas craft. I'm so excited to share this one with you. It's a little bit non-traditional, a little bit different, but it's been in my head for months and I have been waiting until I can get to my Christmas crafts to get it done. So here I have stamped out all the images that I'm using. I used a mix of the underwater theme stamp sets that Lawn Fawn has brought out. What I did need in particular though was all this coral, and I'm using a lot of Lawn Fawn colours here to stamp them out. I did start off with the red, but you'll notice in the card later I didn't actually use the red coral. I changed it to the fresh lavender instead. I felt like the red and the pink were a little bit too close together, and I was missing purple. I can't believe I didn't grab the purple to begin with, so you won't see that in the final card. I'm just stamping these out once. I do find these coral pieces to be a little bit bubbly when you stamp them. If I wanted a really clear image, I would have to stamp them twice, but I actually really like that effect for the coral. It makes it look a bit bumpy and a bit uneven, just like real coral would be. I stamped out a lot of these and I die cut them. Thank goodness it was one of the earlier sets that I purchased back when I was purchasing the matching die sets. Otherwise I would have been there for a very long time cutting that out. I'm just going to do some quick colouring of these images using my super simple technique of just 2 colours per area, a light colour, a darker one, and just simply blending them together. Okay, so I showed about half the colouring there. I think that's enough. There's a lot of colouring in this one. So what I've done here is I've cut out some very basic circle shapes on my Cricut. I've done this before with another one of my Wreath cards, the one with all the cookies around it. It's the same very simple technique here. I'm using 2 just to give it a bit of thickness. And what I'm going to do with this is place all the images that I want to be a part of my wreath all over this so that I can play with the positioning of everything. Nothing's super permanent yet. And then I can place it on my card and decide where I want it, if that makes sense. It just gives me a lot more freedom doing it this way rather than sticking it all on the card straight away. I can just move it around a bit better and decide where everything goes. I really loved using the coral for this wreath. Like I said before, this idea has been in my head for months and I have been so excited to make it, but I've never had the time to start my Christmas things until now. So I hope you like the idea. I really do love non-traditional kind of Christmas things, and I know this one has pretty much no traditional colours in it, but it still has a Christmas tree and it's still got a few little creatures wearing hats. So I think that makes it Christmassy enough. Once my wreath was dry, as you can see, it's very easy to move around, and I could map out the space that was going to be within the wreath because I wanted to make a little scene in here. So I marked it out with an erasable pen, and then I got out my Distress Oxide inks. With these, I put a bit of each colour on my mat. I'm using Salty Ocean, Chipped Sapphire, and I think Tumbled Glass. I wet down my paper a little bit. This paper isn't watercolour paper, so it did get that, that funny look where the paper kind of starts to disintegrate a little bit and the texture changes. So it's not designed for this, but it did hold up pretty well. So I wet the paper down first before putting a bit of each of these colours on there, and I just tried to swirl them all together to make it look like a bit of an ocean background. It definitely wasn't perfect, but I'm still pretty happy with how it turned out in the end. If you're going to do something like this, I do highly recommend sourcing some watercolor paper, only so that yours won't warp like mine did. The paper got really saturated and it did bend quite a bit, and although you can't see it in the final product, it did make things a little bit tricky when trying to assemble it and make the paper nice and flat. Once I was done with that little circle, I then just mixed some of the blues together and splattered it all over the place, just to give it a little bit of a background, and then I went in with my white gold watercolor pigment and splattered that all over the top so that I could get some really pretty shimmer onto this paper as well. Moving on to my sentiment, I decided to use the Season's Greetings. I love the Lawn Fawn puns, they're just so silly. My husband cringes every time I say them, but they're just adorable. They're so sweet and innocent, and I love that they just make people smile. It's so funny. For this, I used my banner dies with some dark blue cardstock. I feel like this kind of tied in with that little ocean background that I made. I used lots of anti-static powder so that my embossing powder wouldn't stick, and I stamped it out with my embossing ink and used the Lawn Fawn white embossing powder. It is my favorite embossing powder, this one. I just feel like I get some really, really clean sentiments with this particular powder. Once that was done, I then took it over to my heat tool in the kitchen and embossed it. Here I am prepping my card to stick onto my card base using some really strong double-sided tape. And I don't know if you can see this, but I stuck it down and I tried to get it really flat, and this is what I meant by saying use some watercolor paper if you can. My hands are just sitting there because I was so upset with how it got stuck. I didn't like that it was bumpy. You can't see it in the end. With the wreath being three-dimensional and the pieces on top, you can't really tell, but at that moment I just felt so sad and like I had ruined the card. But I don't start cards again, and there are no practice runs here in my craft space because I don't have time. So I went with it, and I'm really happy that I did because it does look really good. To give my coral wreath, that kind of sounds like a pun too, coral wreath, a bit of dimension, and to hide my watercolor soaked crinkly paper, I used some foam squares on the back of it, and this gave it lots of height. I did the same with the Christmas tree. I wanted it to stand out and I didn't want it to be flat on that background. I then stuck some rocks at the very bottom of that tree And I tucked these behind the wreath, and it kind of just looks like it's not floating. It looks like it has a base to it. And then it was time to start adding my sentiment, which also had lots of foam squares on it to give it a bit of dimension as well. And then my favourite part is adding all of the little characters around the wreath and the card. Now, unfortunately, at this point, my phone died and I didn't get to capture sticking the last of the images on, but here is the finished card. I am very happy with it. It's shiny, it's cute, I love ocean themed things, and I really feel like it is Christmassy enough to be classed as a Christmas card, even though it's a little bit different. I really hope you like this video. I have so many more Christmas crafts to share with you. My list is growing. I don't know where I'm going to get the time to make all of these things, but I have so much planned to share with you. So make sure you're subscribed if you haven't already, so that you don't miss out on anything. And please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you really liked it. I can't wait to share more with you soon. Thank you so much for watching. Bye for now.